Hello, boys and girls. Bill here, that owl guy. Wanted to take some time today to talk about barn owls and these barn owl boxes. We do quite a few of these, but I've never bothered to make a video on it, and dawned on me I should. There's some really specific things you need to know about barn owls and these boxes. Unlike other owls or other birds, we have a little bit of a fudge factor with those birds. There are some very specific things you need to do to take care of these. Okay, so let's start with the box. As you can see, these boxes are about twice the size of our screech owl boxes. Okay, and you're going to notice it's got a large square opening on one side. It's got this platform, so let's go through that first. Square opening on one side. You want this part of the box to be a good area for the chicks and the parents to not only be reclusive and feel protected, but this also protects them from any weather, and we'll get to that in a minute and discuss that. Also, these boxes have an exercise platform, and you're going to notice this one's offset to one side. That's just a design change we've made. I used to have the boxes with the exercise platform that went all the way out to here. We noticed that the owlets weren't using this side. They were staying close to the doorway, so just chop that off. Don't use the material. Don't need to worry about it. Okay. The reason you need the exercise platform is as these owlets grow, they're going to want to get out of the nest. Okay, which is one reason why these nests are so tall. These boxes are so tall. You want to keep them in there as long as you can. All right, but ultimately they're going to try and get out in that doorway, and what will happen is they'll all try to do it at once, and you get one in the doorway, and then the one behind them will pop up and push the other one out, and he'll hit the ground, and he might as well be a dead owl. Okay, so this exercise platform, this one will pop up here, and he'll come out here and stand and perch on this, and they'll work their wings and exercise their wings, and the other ones can come out behind them, and they'll all do the same thing. And then when the parents come back to return to feed them, everybody goes back in the hole, everybody gets taken care of. Okay, so that's the main reason for that. They don't really branch like other owls do, and we'll get to that in a minute too. Okay, but again, I want you to notice how tall this box is. Okay, and that's because the chicks are bigger than screech owls. Adult owls weigh about a pound. Okay, and you want to keep them in that box as long as you can, so you want to make it difficult for them to get in that hole, which is one reason why if you buy a barn owl box, you do not want a box that has the hole on the bottom of the box. Okay, barn owls will roost in those, but all your chicks are going to die because all of them are going to fall out of the nest, and that's going to be the end of them. So much for that. These owls are very sensitive to weather. Okay, their lifespan is about 4 years. Most of that is weather related, mainly elements and starvation. Okay, one thing on these barn owl boxes, they've got to be absolutely waterproof. Okay, barn owls, the design of their feathers, they've evolved to where they can fly silently. Okay, what that means is their feathers, the down feathers that most birds have evolved differently, so they don't have the insulation qualities that other birds have, and they can't stay dry. So consequently, barn owls have got to stay dry. So you've got to be aware of that. If you get a barn owl box, it's got to be a box that's dry. That's the other reason why you put the hole in the side. If you get a hard blowing rain, it's only going to get that part of the box wet. This will stay dry. Okay, so you got that. That's a critical thing with barn owls. All right, and you're going to notice in our box we've got a bigger pillar in the back, and we use 5 screws. You mount the same way, you hang by that center hole, and then you run in these top 3, and these bottom 2 are angled in a little bit, and you can run those in. That's just because this whole assembly is much heavier than the other boxes. Okay, and I'll walk around the back side, and you can see how much more substantial that is than the regular owl boxes we have. And on our boxes, this panel on the back side of the box, this bottom panel, slides all the way out. Okay, and you can slide it out in either direction to clean out the box. Okay, and we put it close to this, to the tree, instead of putting it out here, because there's going to be some friction with this, and as you're pulling this, you don't want to be pulling against the mount. So you want this as close to the mount as possible, so if you have any friction, you're not putting any pressure or binding on your mounting. Okay, so that's the reason for that. All right. Okay, so when you're putting these boxes up, they don't need to go very high. 10 to 15 feet is about the max you want to be about these. Okay, you got to remember, these birds fly very low to the ground. Okay, their average hunting flight height is about 6 feet. So they're similar to the screech owls in that they populate the lower part of the let's just call it the flight atmosphere. Okay, so 6 feet is about where they cruise when they're hunting, and they'll go a little bit higher than that, but 10-15 feet max. And you want to mount this the same way. You want to rope this box up to you. One other thing, when you're mounting this box, once you figure out where you're going to mount it, get your screw in the tree, your mounting screw in the tree, go ahead and rope it up to you, get yourself situated so your feet are planted firmly on your ladder. Okay, and you want to grab the box by this opening, and preferably by the bottom side. What you don't want to do is grab it by one of these horns or by this. Okay, it's a heavy box and you're going to end up damaging that. So grab by the opening and by the bottom horn if you can. If you're strong enough, you can pick it up with one arm with this, but they're pretty heavy boxes, and we use cedar on these boxes just to keep them a little bit lighter. A lot of guys build these boxes out of plywood, but to make them where they don't warp, you need to use really thick, like 1/2-inch plywood, which becomes really heavy, just hard to handle. And if you use thicker or thinner plywood, then you're going to have to end up putting an internal structure into it, so your weight still goes up. So we're using cedar like we do on all our other boxes, so it stays relatively lightweight, and you just don't kill yourself trying to put the thing up. Okay. All right, a couple more things about these boxes. You're going to notice right there, that little rail right there. Okay, that's a drip rail, and it goes back to these birds having to be as dry as possible. So what'll happen, rain can fall, hit this, and then can lip under and run down and run in the opening or run through the vent hole here. Okay, this just stops that from happening. So that's a drip rail. Okay, and you'll also notice on the exercise platform, several inches below the opening of the door, that's so if you get a heavy rain and it's pushing the water, it doesn't push it up into the door. And there's also drain areas on this platform. Okay, and you'll notice one more thing. You got the ventilation there, and we got ventilation there. So it's the same sort of ventilation we use on our screech owl boxes, and just keeps them cooler during the summertime so the birds don't overheat. They're as subject to overheating as they are to freezing to death. So having all said that, let's talk about these owls for a minute. And I'll go from beginning to end on these owls. Excuse me if I kind of end up all over the place with this, but I'll try and do it in some sort of a sensible order. These barn owls are a medium-sized owl. They weigh about a pound. Okay, males and females are about the same size. The male may be a tiny bit smaller. When the female has eggs in her, she may weigh half again as much as the male. Okay, and the way you can generally tell the difference between them is the males are going to have much lighter plumage. Their bellies are going to be basically white, and the females may have black spots on her belly, and she's going to have a little darker colors on her wings and back. Okay, that's probably the best way to tell the difference between the sexes. All right, they do mate for life, but they don't necessarily hang around each other all year round. Now, they may use the same box all year round together, but they don't hunt together. All right, so when she has her eggs, their mating season is basically March through June, if you want to put a number on it, but they've been known to nest year round, or to mate year round, okay? And they've been known to mate as many as 3 times in a year. 3 is pretty rare, 2 is not uncommon, but each successive mating, they're going to have less eggs. Now, these birds can lay from 2 to 12 or 14 eggs, okay? A typical clutch of eggs is going to be 6 eggs. And she doesn't lay them at the same time. She'll lay an egg and start incubating in it, and a couple days later she'll lay another egg and start incubating it in succession, okay? So say she has 6 eggs. Each one of those hatchlings is going to be a couple days younger than the next. So this is where the attrition rate on the chicks begins to come in. Typically you're going to end up with probably 4 chicks that survive that batch, and it's simply because the older chicks will outcompete the younger chicks for food. It's just that simple, okay? But one advantage the mother does have by having the chicks in succession like that instead of all at the same time, she can spread the food load out a little bit among those chicks. So the bigger chick may eat more, next one may eat a little less, next one may eat a little less, instead of having to feed them all the same amount at the same time. And the father will be bringing the food in, okay? And of note, during the courtship period, one thing the male does to court the female is he'll bring her rats or mice or rodents. That's his gift to her. So apparently the better the rat, the more romantic it is. But interesting little fact, but that's peculiar to barn owls, okay? So as these chicks grow, again, they're going to want to, ultimately they're going to want to get out of that hole, okay? They're going to be quite large when they do that. So that's why you got this exercise platform, so they can get out of that hole and not fall to the ground. If they fall to the ground, they're not like screech owls. They're going to starve to death, okay? So got to have the exercise platform. They'll get up there, they'll exercise their wings, they'll move in and out of the box, and ultimately when they're ready to fly, they're pretty much on their own. The parents will help them out for a few days, but typically once the chicks are flying, they already know how to hunt. They just have an innate ability. The parents don't teach them. So I mean, effectively it's genetic memory, so they already know how to hunt. Their challenge is finding food, okay? And they're battling finding food and the elements, okay? Barn owls don't hunt when it's stormy outside, or it's really terrible weather outside, or it's horribly cold. They can't afford to get wet, and they don't maintain body fat like other birds do. It's just a matter of their genetic buildup, okay? So they focus on energy conservation as much as they can, all right? So the highest attrition rate on these chicks is going to be in their first year. If they can survive their first year, they're going to do pretty good. But having said that, the parents may starve after feeding the chicks, because they've got to hunt not only to feed the chicks but to feed themselves. So a lot of times you'll find parents will starve themselves to death to take care of their chicks, and then shortly after the chicks fly off, you may find a dead barn owl around because it simply has starved itself to death because it couldn't keep up with the food loads it needed, okay? So sad but true. The parents will hunt the same grounds. They don't hunt together, and these birds are not territorial. They're territorial as far as their nest is concerned, but you may have a ranch or a lot somewhere, and you could have 3 or 4 or 5 pairs of barn owls, hunting in the same area. They're not territorial. They're actually pretty gregarious. If you go into a big barn or a grain silo or something like that, and you see barn owls in there, you may see 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 barn owls in a grain silo. So they're not at all territorial. All right. All right. These birds' hunting habits are different than other owls. They hunt almost strictly on the wing. Okay, so they're in flight, and they'll fly 6 to 8 feet off the ground around a field, a grass field or marshland, something like that, and they will listen for their prey. So they fly absolutely silently. Okay, these are the quietest birds there are. They are absolutely silent. Okay, having said that, the barn owl has the keenest hearing in the animal kingdom. Okay, and they can be flying over a field and hear a mouse in the grass, and then they'll zero in on it and attack it and get it. Okay, now the barn owls are not uncommon, but they're uncommonly seen because they're almost strictly nocturnal. Okay, now in the wintertime they may change their hunting habits a little bit. You may see them in the daytime perched up in a tree along the borderline of a field, and that's because they're conserving energy because they're not getting as much food in the wintertime, and they'll sit up in that perch and listen so they don't have to fly, and then they'll find their food, and they're warming themselves up during the daytime. Okay, so you'll see them in the daytime. In the winter, in the summertime though, they're almost strictly hunting on the wing, and they'll either fly over a prey and go right into them, or a lot of times you see them go up and they'll hover and pinpoint them and then dive on them. Okay, and they need to eat 3 or 4 meals a night just to maintain their body weight. So you can see how if you have a run of bad weather, a string of bad storms, stormy days, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 days of stormy weather, or extremely cold, snowy weather, something like that, you can see how these owls can starve out, especially since they don't maintain really any body fat compared to other birds. Okay, and they don't have the protective down that other birds have. All right, but like I said, you may have 4, 5, or 6 owls hunting in the same field. They're not territorial as far as that goes. Okay, so that all goes back to their high attrition rate when they're younger. If they're living in an area that cannot support them, or they feel like they are not getting enough food, they'll venture out. Okay, and a couple things can happen. They can head for the high seas and never find a place that will support them, that has enough food for them. And remember, while they're doing that flight, if they're flying a couple hundred miles, they're burning energy. Or they may just be environmentally struck. They may run into storms and get soaked and die of pneumonia, or cold weather will take them out. So any number of things. So once they leave their area that they were born in, they're completely on their own, and that adds to the high attrition rate on these owls. Okay, now fortunately, as more people put these houses up, that attrition rate has been coming down, and these owls are around the world. They're worldwide. Okay, they're in South America, they're North America, they're Australia, they're England, Europe, they're everywhere. And fortunately, they can live, like I said, symbiotically with humans. Now, I did have a customer ask me if they were messy. The answer to that question is yeah, they are. If you ever walk into a grain silo or a barn, 2-story barn, something like that, that has 4 or 5 barn owls in it, you'll see their feces everywhere, and it's because they populate that little tiny constricted area, and they just poop on everything. Okay, so if you can put these houses up outdoors, that's the best bet for you. And these houses can go, like I said, up on a tree. They can go on the side of a house. They can go on the side of a barn. If you put them on a tree, it needs to be on a tree that's around the perimeter of the field or the grassy area that you're trying to attract the owls to. Okay, and you prefer the box to be pointed toward the field. So it needs to be on a border tree pointed toward the field. Okay, and like I said, more than one box of these, in this particular case, more than one box is always a good thing. Okay, and I mean, if you could have a family of, or 2 or 3 or 4 families of owls living on a pasture, that would be huge. All right. So I guess one last thing I need to say, or one of the last things I need to say, I've got people asking me, you know, can I put these houses near my house? Yeah, you can. I don't suggest it for 2 reasons. One, like I said, these barn owls don't really tolerate people well. They're just not. They're not like screech owls or barred owls where they'll just sit there and look at you. They really don't like being around people. Having said that, they make a lot of noise. I mean, they make a lot of noise. And if you've got one of these houses within earshot of your bedroom, you're not going to get any sleep. I mean, they make hissing and screaming noises. I mean, sometimes it sounds like somebody's being bloody cut in little pieces. So you just don't put these near your house if you want some peace and quiet. Okay, if you don't mind the noise, hey, go for it. But like I said, by far the best area to put these houses is going to be on a tree bordering some pasture land, pointed toward the pasture land. And you can put, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 houses up, for crying out loud. They don't need a lot of separation. It's probably a good idea to have, you know, a couple 100-foot separation on them. But like I said, they're not territorial at all, except for when they're nesting, and even then they tolerate each other quite well. So as long as you're within a couple 100 foot, you know, they'll leave each other alone. Only thing that hunts these owls is other bigger owls. Some hawks will hunt them, and hawks, eagles, things like that, and they fall victim to possums and raccoons and things like that. They'll fall victims to them in the boxes, and that's typically because somebody put a box up in a too low of a position, or a tree that's slanted, and the possum or the raccoon can get up there and get in the box. Okay. One other thing about mounting these boxes, guys, on the other owl boxes, we told you guys it doesn't matter if you tilt them back a little bit or forward a little bit. Don't tilt these back a little bit. They need to be vertical, or you can tilt them forward a little bit. That's just because you don't want any rain intrusion. I can't say enough about these owls having to be dry. I mean, that is the key thing on barn owls, is they have to have a dry environment. Okay, they just will not live. The chicks will not live. I mean, they'll die of disease, starvation, exposure, everything else. Okay, I think that's pretty much it on these barn owls, guys. If I get any other interesting facts about them, I'll let you know. A bunch of barn owls is called a stable of owls. Go figure. Okay, and again, it's hard to tell the difference between the males and females as far as size goes. Typically, the female is going to have the brighter colors, which again is different in the animal kingdom. Mostly in the animal kingdom, the male birds have got the colors. In this case, the female owl has the more predominant colors. Okay, pretty much think that's it, guys. If y'all get one of these barn owl houses, enjoy it. Just be careful putting them up. They're heavy, they're bulky. Okay, but they're designed to keep the birds dry and keep the baby birds in the box as long as possible. And you can build these boxes quite a bit bigger than this. I've got these down to not a minimum size, but a manageable size. But honestly, I've seen barn owl boxes twice this big. And a lot of guys go to a lot of effort on these boxes, especially in England. Oh, that reminds me, while I'm thinking about that, if you putting a barn owl box up on your property, put it away from a road. Okay, the reason being, because these birds hunt while they're in flight, and like I said before in a previous video, the birds, their eyes don't move in their heads. They're always looking straight ahead. Okay, if they're listening, or they spot something ahead of them, they'll fly across the road and just get hit by a car. There's a abnormally large amount of barn owls get hit by cars as compared to other owls, and it's because of the way they hunt on the wing. Instead of sitting in a perch and flying after something, they're already on the move, and they'll shoot straight across the road and will never see a car coming, and they'll get hit by a car. So when you mount these up, put them away from a road. Okay, especially if it's a busy road. If it's just a country road, not that big of a deal. But if it's a busy road or highway, definitely get these boxes away from that road, point in the opposite direction. Just get them away from the road as best you can. I pretty much think that's it, guys. If y'all have any more questions about these little critters, let me know. Shoot me a text or shoot me an email. I'm sure I'm going to have more questions on these later. But that's going to be about it. All right, guys. We'll see y'all later. Have a great one. Okay, so a couple other things. If you're going to use bedding in these boxes, pine beddings. Okay? Pine bedding. Don't use cedar. Don't put hay in there. So on these big boxes, about a coffee can, maybe a coffee can and a half's worth is all you need. Okay? Just remember, these birds are environmentally sensitive, so your box has got to be dry. Whether you buy this box or you try and make your own, it's got to be dry. Okay? Otherwise you're going to lose birds. I think that's about it, guys. Give you one more view of this box so you have an idea what they look like. Stand back a little bit here, and you can see how tall they are. And a lot of guys make their boxes, they'll put tar paper up here or even shingles on top just to make sure they stay dry. I don't worry about that. I go ahead and do so much gluing and water sealing up here. I don't worry about that. And if you get a little bit of moisture in the box along seams or something like that, that's not a big deal. You just don't want to have a flood event where it's just constantly raining down on the birds. Okay, have another view of it that way. So I hope this was informative for y'all. Can't think of anything else I can tell you about the barn owls that you really need to know. They do typically leave the nest after about 8 to 10 weeks. That's the thing. I think that's probably the only thing I haven't mentioned. But again, if you're going to put these barn owl boxes up and you've got a reasonable sized piece of land, you're better to get 2, 3, 4 boxes, so that when you do get a population in there and you do get a breeding pair, you'll keep those other owls around your property, assuming you have enough food. All right, guys, later.